My name is Connor Moran. I'm the Executive Director of Madison Public Library Foundation. Thank you all for being here to celebrate Lunch for Libraries. Last year I stood here at this podium and talked about how far we'd come from the first Lunch for Libraries. I asked if there was anyone who had been in that first room. People raised their hands. And I am certain that years from now, I'm going to be standing at this podium asking you if you were in this room today. It's absolutely going to be fantastic. I couldn't be happier to welcome Tommy Orange as the 2024 Lunch for Libraries speaker for his new novel, Wandering Stars. Pardon me. If you saw Tommy for either of his Wisconsin Book Festival events for There, you'll know that we're in for something truly special. I'd also like to thank Aaron Birdbear for being Tommy's conversation partner this afternoon. Let's give them a round of applause. Before we get truly started, I'd like to invite Cassie Leeport, a member of the Grand Portage Band of Ojibwe, to the stage to offer our land acknowledgement today. Cassie.
Bonjour, Cassie Leeport, Indigenous, Makwa, and Dodem, Gichionigami, and Donjaba. Hello, my name is Cassie Leeport, and I am the director of the Tribal Libraries, Archives, and Museums program at UW-Madison's iSchool, also called TLAM. I am honored to be up here today, and as you have heard, I was asked to do the land acknowledgement. And you know, I actually have pretty mixed feelings about land acknowledgements as a whole. Over the past few years, there's been a trend in beginning important events such as these, with often bleak statements acknowledging the ancestral land on which the event is taking place, and perhaps even the historical trauma associated with that land and the people of that land throughout history. As most of you probably know, we gather here today on Ho-Chunk land. Ho-Chunk Nation is a sovereign nation that thrives today in countless ways despite the centuries of attempted genocide of their people and of their culture. I could go on in describing the pain and the trauma of this period of time, or I could speak to the resiliency of the nation. I could speak to the resiliency of the nation, as so many land acknowledgements do. But a true land acknowledgement is more than words that feel obligatory beginning an event. A true land acknowledgement should be specific to the time, specific to the place, and specific to the purpose of the event that is then embodied through the individuals and the actions of those individuals at the event. So we gather here today to support libraries. And I am so grateful that there are people like you in this room that believe in supporting libraries and take action to support libraries. I ask you though, which libraries do you support? How many of you have visited, supported, or even heard of the tribal libraries, the tribal archives, and the tribal museums that exist within the 12 tribal nations of Wisconsin? Ho-Chunk Nation, whose land we are on today, opened a brand new library this spring, and they have a grand opening scheduled for September. And Ho-Chunk Nation's museum is facing an incredibly difficult time after being forced to evacuate its space due to a nearby fire and subsequent damage of that fire. How could we in this room support them? How can we take action of the land that we are on and acknowledge it? So my call for all of you is to learn about the tribal libraries, the tribal archives, and the tribal museums, and the tribal nations, and to visit them and support them as a way to acknowledge the ancestral lands of this land now called Wisconsin. Chimigwech, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and share this call of action with you all.
Thank you, Cassie. Tomorrow, all of you will get an email that has a wonderful set of resources that Cassie provided so that you can get out and visit those libraries, archives, and museums. This event is about libraries, and it is, exactly as she said, about how we can collectively act to make a difference in our libraries, which incidentally is the exact reason that Madison Public Library Foundation exists. The foundation was started in 1993 to mobilize the Madison community to continuously improve, promote, and support Madison Public Library. That community is made up of every person in this room today and many people across the city who rely on the library for free and equitable access to books, technology, and programming. I'm so proud of all of the ways that the foundation helps make our library system better every day. Thank you to all of you. One of the ways we make the library better is through the Wisconsin Book Festival, which this event supports. Over the past 12 years, the festival has emerged as the #1 way that the public interacts with programs at Madison Public Library. Proceeds from today support the festival, which in 2023 hosted 90+ events, put almost 5,000 free books in readers' hands, and reached more than 12,000 people with free programming. Free programming that enhances the library impact by putting readers in direct conversation with writers, as we're going to see, and engaging our community in the discussion of ideas, which I hope you will start at your tables and take home with you and hand this book to more and more people because we need to be talking about these things. The Wisconsin Book Festival is made possible in part through your support today, as well as our Lunch for Libraries sponsors and guests, and Book Festival sponsors themselves. Those Book Festival sponsors include our presenting sponsor, the Pleasant T. Rowland Foundation, as well as many champions, benefactors, and members who are donning orange ribbons today on their name tags. Speaking of ribbons on name tags, there are many. Those ribbons identify Madison Public Library Foundation's board members, committee members, our event planning committee, table captains, as well as members of our epilogue circle. If you have a ribbon on your name tag, which I don't, I want to extend a special thank you for the role you play in the life of the foundation. Would you all please stand? Thank you. From everyone who works in Madison Public Library, from all of us at the foundation, you really are the way that we're able to fill this room with 800 people and make such a difference. I want to thank a few sponsors while you eat. Our presenting sponsors, BMO Bank, thank you. Our leader sponsors, Laura and William Bird. Our partner sponsors, Josh Anderson and Sarah Newyar, the Murray Nemeke Group at Baird. Oh, we're going to clap at the end. It's okay. Godfrey & Kahn, Madison Community Foundation, Park Bank, Perkins Coie, Lucy Santa, Task, Virant, Von Briesen, and Wipfli. And then we have 27 advocate level sponsors, which I'm going to not read to you, but please know that I feel the same level of gratitude to all of you. Among those advocate level sponsors, 3 specifically deserve call outs today. Andrew Clarkowski and Tana Elias, who is the incoming director of Madison Public Library. First Business Bank and Michael Best. Each one of those sponsors chose to add a cost to their sponsorship to underwrite additional seats at tables today for our community partners. Special thanks to them for that generosity. Let's have a big round of applause for everyone. Okay, and I'm almost done. But speaking of added generosity, guests at previous Lunch for Libraries, so if you have a problem with this, you have a problem with them, asked us that they would like an easy way to donate at the event. They asked, how can we do more? And even though we've already broken records today, which I'll talk to you about at the end, I am confident we can absolutely do more. I know many of you in this room have already given money, time, energy to putting on this event, but we do have an opportunity. If just half the people in this room today were to make an extra $25 donation, we would raise an extra $10,000. And that $10,000 would pay for all of the travel costs for every author who comes to the Book Festival in the fall. It's a big impact for, an affordable donation. So there is a sign on your tables with a QR code on the table tent that you can make a donation online. There's a remittance envelope on everyone's table, and you can also visit our automatic dip jar just outside the doors to my right to make a donation today. If you do this, it will save a tremendous amount of time and energy on Jane and my part, making sure that we have the budget to do that. I really appreciate everyone being here, and I'd like to welcome Doug Heading from BMO Private Bank to give us his remarks today.
Good afternoon. My name is Doug Heading, and I'm a managing director with BMO Wealth Management. BMO is proud to be the presenting sponsor for the Lunch for Libraries event, as BMO has been a strong proponent of Madison libraries for many years. Libraries meet so many of the bank's areas of interest, including education, arts and culture, basic needs and social services, service to seniors, children, and everyone in between. Today we gather with a shared passion for literacy and learning. I come from a long family lineage of educators. In fact, I'm the oddball that decided to go into banking. And my mother-in-law, she spent her entire career as a librarian in the Fond du Lac library system. So for me personally, libraries hold a special place of learning and bringing resources to the community. This is part of the reason why I'm proud to work for BMO as we continue to invest in programs like the Wisconsin Book Festival, which encourages thoughtful community engagement in issues critical to our collective well-being. Issues related to social justice, effective government, health, and the environment. So regardless of our personal or professional journeys, each one of us has found our local library to be a vital source of knowledge on our path, whether it be through accessing resources, information to start a new business, or discovering the new bestseller to share with our circle of friends. There will always be a place for these institutions in our lives. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope you are enjoying the conversations with the people at your table like I have been. Please continue to enjoy your lunch as we share a few more words. My name is Tana Elias, and on May 12, I'll become the next director at Madison Public Library. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to welcome you all to this amazing event today. In my 3 decades at the library, I've watched it change and grow to meet community needs. It is a place where people use technology that connects them to employment opportunities and helps them launch businesses. It is a place that provides books, story times, and other library materials in multiple languages, reflecting the diversity of the families living in our city. And most importantly, it is a place where all are welcome and where knowledge and information remain free and accessible to everyone. Of the many projects I've helped launch during my years at the library, the one most dear to me is the Wisconsin Book Festival. Since the library and the foundation assumed leadership of the festival in 2013, we've brought over 1,000 free author events to Madison. Stories and information have incredible power, and it's been a true joy to see so many festival attendees discover new points of view and to be touched and inspired by the stories of others. Those connections are made possible by the work of the Madison Public Library Foundation. In addition to supporting youth literacy programs at the library, the proceeds from Lunch for Libraries support the Wisconsin Book Festival each and every year. This lunch event is a significant reason that the other year-round programs hosted by the Book Festival can remain free and open to the public. I'm honored to introduce the following short video presentation about the festival and what makes it such a special feature of our community.
Hi everyone, I'm Jane Rotunda. I'm the director of the Wisconsin Book Festival. The Wisconsin Book Festival is this amazing community resource. It's free public events featuring authors and books of all different kinds of genres, for all different ages, communities.
I love the Wisconsin Book Festival. This festival gives my center a chance to reach an audience beyond the campus community.
The Wisconsin Book Festival is just a chance to be connected to other readers that live in our own city that we maybe have never met before, to be connected to authors who are visiting Madison.
Guests don't have to pay for anything or reserve a seat or RSVP. They just show up and they get to listen to world-class writers.
One thing that happened last year that was pretty amazing was we hosted Clint Smith, and we had this group of students arrive with their teacher all the way from the Driftless areas, and it was just this moment where they positively lit up, with excitement just for the event and to be able to be in Madison in this space and hear amazing, inspiring poetry by someone who they respect, and then also on top of that to be able to hand them a signed copy of Clint's book. Another really special thing that we do with the festival is we go on school visits. So we bring authors and books to schools where the author gets to really connect one-on-one with this engaged group of students and youth. We have amazing supporters, big and small, who contribute to the festival, and all of their financial support allows us to bring authors to Madison into our libraries for free for the public to enjoy year-round. It's impossible to imagine programming that isn't accessible, and that's something that we stand behind with the festival. Regardless of where you come from or where you're going, the festival is here for you, and it will be here for you.
Hey everyone, it's me again. Happy 13th annual Lunch for Libraries. It is such an overwhelming honor and pleasure to be the director of the Wisconsin Book Festival. And wow, is it wonderful to be here today celebrating libraries with such an inspired and dedicated community of book lovers. As you can see and hear and tell from all of these wonderful remarks before me, the Wisconsin Book Festival is alive and well, and that's thanks to you. Our spring, we've done so much in the last year. You heard about 12,500 people coming to more than 90 events and giving away nearly 5,000 books. And our spring programming is underway this year. We have 23 total events this season, including 2 school visits, as well as a marquee event next Tuesday. Mark your calendar if you haven't already. We're at the Orpheum Theater with Amor Tolles for his new collection of short stories. I really want to thank you for building and uplifting this community and creating opportunities for us to come together for a shared love of books and reading. So speaking of loving and lifting books, how about those gorgeous books as our table centerpieces? Yeah. I promise I'm going to get to our main event very soon. But first, I want to invite everyone to take their copy of Wandering Stars and hold it up so I can take a photo of this amazing room full of beautiful books and all of you beautiful people. Thank you, everyone, for taking a moment and making that little memory with us. So today we're welcoming Tommy Orange. Tommy Orange is a graduate of the MFA program at the Institute of American Indian Arts. He's an enrolled member of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma. He was born and raised in Oakland, California, where he currently lives with his family. It's pretty special that almost exactly a year ago, Tommy was right here in Madison for his first book, They're There, which was a finalist for the 2019 Pulitzer Prize and received the 2019 American Book Award. He was the guest author of a program organized by the Center for the Humanities called The Great World Text, where he spent the entire day engaging with high school students and teachers discussing the book They're There. Ever generous with his time and gracious with his energy, he also stopped by Central Library for a public event that same evening. And I remember talking to him about how he was hard at work on his second novel and how he was grappling with the doom that comes from the sophomore effort. Tommy, congratulations. You're on the other side, and the result is a triumphant work of literature that has been described. Yeah. It has been described as a kind of book that saves lives. And while Wandering Stars is part prequel, part sequel, let's call it a breathtaking, sweeping expansion of They're There. Is that fair? It wholly stands on its own, breaking our hearts and at the same time giving us hope as we follow the descendants of Jude Starr, a Cheyenne survivor of the 1864 Sand Creek Massacre, all the way into the present day. And here to talk about Wandering Stars with Tommy and facilitate our conversation is Aaron Birdbear. Aaron Birdbear is a citizen of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Dene nations and is enrolled in the 3 affiliated tribes of the Fort Berthold Reservation in North Dakota. Aaron served as the inaugural director of the tribal relations at the University of Wisconsin-Madison from 2019 through 2023. And while at UW-Madison, Aaron co-created the First Nations Cultural Landscape Tour and WisconsinFirstNations.org to help pre-K through 12th grade educators teach the 12 Native Nations of Wisconsin. He's joined today by his wife, Marianne Birdbear. So please join me in welcoming Tommy Orange and Aaron Birdbear.
Check, check. All right, we got to follow those artists. They know what's up with all these wonderful communications devices. Thank you, Tommy.
I had my undergrad was in sound engineering.
Well, I want to say welcome to Dejope and the ancestral lands of the Ho-Chunk, the people of the sacred voice, whose language is the parent language of the Siouan language family, AKA the root language of many of the languages of the Central Plains, including the languages of the Mandan and Hidatsa 1,000 miles west of here. If I can borrow your words, Dejope is a super fact, a fact that feels so big. Dejope is one of the most important indigenous cultural centers of the Great Lakes, where people have thrived and gathered on these lake shores for at least 12,000 years. These shores have been a place of teaching and gathering for millennia, with the thousands of mound burial sites that are also used for the transmission of knowledge. Is there a super fact you'd like to share about the Cheyenne and Arapaho peoples today with us?
Super fact. There's a bunch of different circles we used to have. You know, there's the breakup of tribes that goes into like clans and all these different words. There's a word for one of our circles. And this is a super fact because it just goes to show how different worldviews are and how much language reveals of different worldviews. So there's a Cheyenne word for one circle of people that translates as the bent leg of insect people. And I don't know how you would end up getting that description for the type of people you are, but it goes to show that like they thought very differently of the world and how to describe people.
That's awesome. Now, I wrote these questions, and I'm not necessarily a literary specialist, and so I feel like I channeled Luther in some way, that all these questions could be answered yes or no. So hopefully we go beyond just a yes or no as we continue to go along. So I apologize about the nature of my questions, but I like to be wholly surprised of the plot, characters, and setting. I literally close my eyes and cover my ears and hum something during movie trailers for movies I really want to see, like Civil War that I'm going to go see later today. And so with this in mind, I read your books in the wrong order, not realizing the continuity of the story. It may be described as watching The Godfather 2 before Godfather 1. It makes sense, but maybe not the way the artist intended. Wandering Stars reminded me a bit of Louise Erdrich, intergenerational storytelling with characters popping up over multiple novels. When you wrote Wandering Stars, what interested you in expanding the more compact generations presented in There to 7 generations in Wandering Stars?
Well, this isn't a yes or no question at all. Thank you, Aaron, and thank you all for coming and for supporting this organization and for all of the good energy I can feel. I feel really comfortable in conference spaces because I spent many years in nonprofit, and going to conferences and being like feeling really secure wearing a badge around to get access to places, to breakout sessions and that kind of thing. So there's a way that if you haven't read either books, there's a way that it can be read where you read the first part of Wandering Stars, and then There, and then the second and third part of, did I say that right? Of Wandering Stars. And you could probably do that with Godfather, too. If you do Godfather 2, the first part, the prequel part, and then Godfather 1, Godfather 3. So I hadn't intended on writing a sequel when I finished There. It was supposed to be standalone, and in March of 2018, before There came out, I was signing 5,000 copies of the book at a warehouse north of Baltimore, and I was with a team of sales reps, and they were passing me books, and they put on a playlist because we spent 2 days together, and you can't keep up a conversation for 2 days with anybody that you don't know, even if you do know people. But these were complete strangers, so music in the background's really nice. They put on a Spotify playlist based on There There by Radiohead, of course, and Wandering Star by Portishead came on. And for whatever reason, and I am getting to your question, whatever reason, I knew in that moment I'm going to write a sequel, and it's going to be called Wandering Stars. Makes no sense why I would be convinced of that. With There There as a title, it didn't come until halfway through writing the book, till I landed on the title. With this book, the title came, and I somehow found my way to make the title make sense. So a year later, I'm in Sweden for the translation of There There. And I get invited to a museum, and it's this really awkward curator who is sort of like telling me how he knows how wrong it is that they have all these people's stuff. This is like the new era of museum sort of wokeness. Like we know it's wrong that we have it, but when we're trying to find out what to do with it, but in the meantime, do you want to see it? And so I was like, yeah. And they had Southern Cheyenne stuff. I'm like, how did it end up in Sweden? So I see our regalia, and then I see this newspaper clipping about Southern Cheyennes in Florida in 1875, and I know enough about my tribe's history to know that we were never in Florida, and who can blame them?
Seminoles.
So I go down this rabbit hole of information about how we were in Florida, and it leads to a prison castle and a star-shaped prison castle. And immediately I'm like, okay, here's a star. And what I was writing, Wandering Stars, was a straightforward sequel. There was no history parts. What I was writing was like immediately after the end of There There, like literally the first scene, I'm like at the Coliseum hanging out with birds in the bleachers, like pecking at food and like describing the wind going through the Coliseum. And so I find out this history piece, and I'm doing this research about these prisoners at this prison castle, and I'm reading the list of the actual prisoners who were there, and one of the prisoners' name is Star at the star-shaped prison castle. And I start to feel like a well of emotion, thinking like I was convinced about this title for some reason. And then I see another prisoner name, and it's Bear Shield. And this was a family name from There There. And it feels like this fated moment or fated piece of information, or super fact, if you will. And so I realize in that moment that I'm gonna do a generational line. And I didn't actually realize until the end of writing Wandering Stars. Actually, my wife asked me, she was like, how many generations did you end up writing about? And I don't know if you all know that Native people pray for the next 7 generations. That's just the way that a lot of, sort of one of these pan-Indian things, that's what we pray toward the future in the next 7 generations. And there's also sort of prophecies about, from a certain point, we'll have healed a certain amount after 7 generations. So it's an important thing. And so I count in the book, and I'm like, oh shit, 7 generations. So it's not something that I planned. The first book takes place in a relatively short amount of time, if you don't count the occupation of Alcatraz flashback sort of thing. And this book is like 160 years. So it's not something that I planned. But I did want to write something different. I didn't want to write the same book. As Jane was saying, I must have been going around talking about how doomed I felt about writing my next book. With the success of There There, you don't want to write a worse book. You don't want to write the same book. And it's already really hard to write a novel at all. And so it took me 6 years again. And I was happy to try to do this thing where I'm writing about actual historical stuff, and in the minds and thoughts of historical figures or fictional ones that I made up that are based on a lot of research. So it was a challenge, and I was happy to be able to find the connection. I much like with There, I knew I had to get everyone to the powwow, and that was my guiding light. In this book, I had to get everybody to Oakland.
Yeah, I know something about coming up with titles. You know, I'd always wanted to write a book of poetry called Urban Indian Ground Zero, but it only remained a title. I discovered I had not the poetry talent of, say, like Adrian C. Lewis or something like that. But I really enjoyed the aspect of how running played into Orville Redfeather's recovery. It made me think of the bits of cultural information we sometimes cling to as urban Indians when we only have a few understandings of our ancestors' ways of being and not the entire picture. In high school, I ran cross-country and longer distance at competitions since I knew little about Mandan, Hidatsa, or Dene cultures, but I knew running was important to all three of my cultures, running for hunting, combat, or relaying messages. And so I ran. I ran far, and I ran fast. Do you think of your writings as guidance or encouragement for those distanced from their indigenous roots to make the entry into a lifelong journey of reconnecting with their ancestors' ways of being?
Yes.
All right. Well done.
You know, I've been lucky enough to go around and meet a lot of young Native people who, in heartfelt ways, tell me how much they've been able to feel like they've been given permission to connect when what they felt before is not enough. And you know, what I was trying to write in both books was never like, you know, a how-to for people to connect. I was trying to render a reality that I knew, because you know, I grew up with a dad who's fluent. His first language was Cheyenne. He was fluent in Cheyenne, and he didn't even see a white person until he was 5 years old. I just heard this story recently. He like picked cotton for 10 cents a day with his grandparents. When he was 5, he took this horse buggy thing with his grandparents to the grocery store, and they sat him on a sack of flour. This is the perfect place to meet your first white people, on a sack of flour. And he sees the grocer, a white guy, talk to his grandparents in Cheyenne, and he just didn't know what was going on. The town that he grew up in, Hammond, Oklahoma, was like pretty mixed, white and Cheyenne specific, so a lot of white people knew the Cheyenne language. But he raised us up in Oakland. He had a lot of hurt from his hometown. His parents didn't raise him. He was raised by his grandparents. And by the time we were young people, they were all gone. So raising us where he grew up and around our people was not really something that he wanted to do. He thought he was protecting us from pain. And he grew up an engineer at the Lawrence Berkeley Labs. And you know, he would eventually call himself an urban Indian, even though he grew up in tribal jurisdiction land and in a very traditional ways. So in a lot of ways, he was really quiet about the stuff that would have connected me deeper, you know, my mom is white and she didn't speak Cheyenne. And so while I heard, you know, Cheyenne prayers for 20 minutes at dinner time and like, you know, how to pass bread and salt and these basic things, I didn't get a lot of cultural information. And we would go back to Oklahoma, and relatives would come through and stay with us, but part of the story that I was trying to tell had to do with not being connected. And then I worked in the Oakland Native community for almost 10 years. And part of that was in data entry and grant writing and eventually digital storytelling, and just heard a lot of people not feel like they weren't enough, feel like they weren't connected enough, but also were making efforts to build community. And urban centers, as you know, Aaron was sharing with me, he grew up in like 7 different cities, so has lived the urban native life, and he told me, hope you don't mind me sharing, that he felt everything in these books, and I think that's probably true in ways that a lot of people can't feel, and I appreciate you sharing that with me. So I wanted to render this idea that there are Native people who exist en masse in this country, who aren't connected in ways that you would expect them to be. The depiction of Native people is so often, Native or Pilgrim Indian or Cowboy Indian, or all these Hollywood depictions, and the way we look. 80% of us have been living in cities for the past more than 10 years. The way we look is not often what people expect us to look like, and our life experience is not what people expect it to be. And that can lead a lot of young people to feel like they can't connect, or they shouldn't, or they're not allowed to, because the expectations from the outside world and the way they see themselves represented, it's like, oh, that's not me. And so I leaned into that disconnection and that feeling of not being enough, and tried to write across generations and various different experiences and into people that were connected, to give a more full picture of this world that I hadn't seen represented very much anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. As the director of tribal relations at UW-Madison, I always felt like I was on a tightrope with no safety net. I felt like I just didn't have the cultural education to provide leadership in this way, but I just kept forging forward as much as I knew how, and I got course corrected by a few people along the way, and I'm really thankful for all the support and guidance people did when us urban Indians who maybe didn't grow up in tradition and ceremony, we don't have that kind of cultural and spiritual background to help guide our leadership, and yet we're still trying to move forward and trying to improve the lives of Indigenous peoples in some way. So thank you for those comments. It's really unimaginable for me the hardships my ancestors endured so I could thrive today. The rounding up and internment of my ancestors onto the Fort Berthold Reservation, where my last name comes from, just as you explained surnames in Wandering Stars. Bird Bear, my ancestor, was interred by the U.S. government and then became a surname to help keep track of the new additions to the internment camp. The 3 affiliated tribes who became affiliated because 95% of our people died from smallpox germ warfare enacted by the United States, and the survivors of these 3 tribes banded together. The Dene, they endured ethnic cleansing known as the Long Walk from Dinétah to Bosque Redondo and back. Wandering Stars paints such a vivid portrait of how genocidal actions like these impact individuals and individual families, such as the Sand Creek Massacre, boarding schools, or the Relocation Act that created so many urban Indian communities, so much dead letter mail across the United States. With your profound gifts for storytelling, Wandering Stars educates people about settler colonialism and American Indian history. Were you interested in telling the stories of families and communities to educate in some ways about why substance abuse became so prevalent in Indigenous communities in the 20th century as a form of coping with assimilation and intergenerational trauma?
So I had a bird bear dream the other day. It was pretty ominous. I hope it doesn't mean anything. I walked into a bathroom and there was a giant bird. It was facing away from me, and it had beautiful feathers, and I was like, oh, cool, giant bird. And it turned around and it was a bear, and it came at me, and the dream ended before I knew if it was gonna attack me, so I'm hoping things don't turn up here.
There's probably a third part of that dream you woke up before you got to. Bird bear in my language, Sagagandabitse, doesn't refer to a bird or a bear. It's how we describe the animal, the bat. So bird bear means bat. And so maybe it was about to transform again and come and get you. I don't know. I found these stories that I found in doing this research so fascinating. To answer the first part, this prison castle being the origin story of boarding schools. A lot of people we don't learn about boarding schools in the general history of Native people because
the way we've institutionalized education is to create patriots, essentially. I don't know any other interpretation that you can make for why we would be like Pilgrims and Indians, meal, nothing. Like literally that's how the education, unless you like have special teachers, the way it's set up is to like make you feel like things were cool. They taught us how to do stuff, and then they just like, I don't know.
Just don't think about it.
So this story was fascinating to me, and the fact that my tribe was at the center, even though it was this awful history, it was fascinating that this guy who basically, so Richard Henry Pratt was the jailer at the prison castle, and he first had the insight that Native people could be more than subhuman when he worked with Buffalo Soldiers and learned that black people could be more than subhuman, which is essentially how people thought of them. And so this experiment that he ran on these prisoners of war was to see if this militarization he learned by working with black people, the Buffalo Soldiers, who were named by Native people because they thought their hair looked like buffalo hair. This 3-year experiment to see if militarization and red-blooded muscular Christianity, these are the types of descriptions he would use, because there's a lot of writings by him out there. He very much wanted to write a book and was very bitter about not ever doing it. He wanted this to work because he legitimately believed Native people were deserving of equal treatment. There were many worse men of his time than Pratt, even though he often looks like the worst villain in the story. So then the boarding schools came about a year after this prison castle experiment ended, and for about 100 years, kids were forced into schools often, or it was just set up that that's where they would end up, and taught that being Native was wrong and was replaced with Christianity. A lot of those years, Native lifeways and ceremonies were outlawed. And this is just like utter decimation of us being able to belong to who we are or feel like we can belong. And the story of substance abuse and Native people is so often told as like, we have a weakness for alcohol, or it's our moral failing. And this is true for a lot of addicts, not only Native people. But we are paired with being addicts in a way that puts it on us, because there's no story told about why we might be going to something to transcend the pain or the loss that we are experiencing. So I very much wanted to tell that story. I wanted to tell the story of Orville and what it would have been like to get shot while dancing at a performance, wearing cultural regalia, how to come back from that. And in the middle of this opioid crisis, like, to show how it happens, to show how, like, you're introduced to this stuff that has people that are getting a lot of money from it who don't really care that there are risks that people can, become addicts and die from overdose. Just to show the story of how that happens. To build a better humanity into the addiction story than a lot of times the way it's portrayed. And the running was a key part of the recovery that Orville ends up experiencing. I never grew up hearing about Cheyennes and running, but I have since found out that it is part of our history to a lot of Native people. I gave it to Orville more because it's been a part of my healing and continues to be.
I grew up in Denver, Colorado for most of my childhood, and despite growing up in Denver and going to public schools, I never heard of the Sand Creek Massacre until I was in my 20s. I was able to visit Sand Creek in 2005 when we took 45 students from UW-Madison on an experiential learning course called In Search of the Multiracial West. Among our many stops on our 3,000-mile journey, we visited Cahokia in Illinois, Tahlequah in the Cherokee Nation, slave plantations and missions in Texas, and Sand Creek in Colorado. At Sand Creek, our bus broke down, and we were out there for a few hours in the warm breeziness of a late spring day. We felt it was a message to us to really reflect and consider what that violence means to us today. If you could download knowledge, AKA Matrix style, into every US citizen's brains, are there any histories or stories you wish everyone knew to better understand contemporary indigenous peoples or the modern Cheyenne and Arapaho nations?
I think when VR first started coming around, I heard about people doing these videos that would build empathy, and that's for modern day humanitarian crisis type situations, and maybe toward fundraising and building empathy toward action. I don't know. I think the Matrix thing is too fast. As much as I would like to use it for certain things, I think sending it through too fast is too jarring. I think something like recreating certain things, I don't know, the Sand Creek Massacre's super horrific. There's tons of details if you're curious. In the prologue, I go into some of those details. And it's 200 to 300 people in the face of other atrocities that we know about in history and in the present. It's not a huge number, but it's significant because of how monstrous the actions the U.S. took on that day when there was a peace treaty in place, and that it was against women and children and elders mostly, and the mutilation that happened. And I think the story of how we've been dehumanized is the story of emphasis that I'd like to tell. And I think if there were a way to recreate certain chapters of U.S. history that really lay out how we have been dehumanized, if we could get a VR compilation and have people sort of get to experience even a first-person point of view version of what that would have been like. I don't know how many people have tried VR, but it feels really crazy to put it on and look around. And I think that could be a Matrix-like version of a way to build empathy and not, information and data. This is why I like novels. You can have somebody walk in the shoes of characters and have them feel things and think with them and use their imaginations to engage with the work and with the life experience. So I think VR could be cool to do something like that, so that all this missing chunk of history that Americans don't know about would really restore our humanity, which we still have a long ways to go, because a lot of people still are very ignorant about who we are now and what we've been through.
I want to thank you personally for writing these works. Wandering Stars and They're There are the first times I connected with a world that spoke my truth and reality. As an urban Indian with teenage parents who broke up before I can remember, I ended up living in many cities. I never read a novel before Wandering Stars where I felt that I fully and completely understood every emotion lived by the characters. Reading Wandering Stars felt like a form of healing for me, and the ending had me crying tears of joy and triumph. That we indigenous peoples of what is now the United States made it through the crucible of assimilation and termination policies, and we're going to keep making it despite the ongoing violence of settler colonialism. Do you share my optimism for indigenous peoples that we might find enduring stability in 2 to 3 more generations from today, now that the 160 plus different indigenous languages and the hundreds of indigenous cultures in the United States were finally decriminalized in 1975 and 1978? When I was in elementary school, our languages were finally decriminalized. And our languages and cultures were finally deemed legal after 100 years of eradication.
I much like my spirituality, which is sort of broken, I was raised evangelical Christian, and also my dad was in Native American church, and they both were just on fire for God since I was very young. I remember asking my parents about a crush when I was like 6 years old, and they were like, as long as she believes in God, it's okay. And I'm like, what? I grew up thinking I wasn't going to make it to adulthood because the end of the world was going to come, and like obsessing over the book of Revelation to search for signs, to know what to look for, to like repent at the last minute and accept Jesus in my heart before the end so I wouldn't go to hell forever. So that sort of like broke me spiritually, and I'm still finding ways to mend that. I was recently described by this Lakota woman who's very close to my family, whose family goes way back in Oakland as an urban Indian family, that I am the most unspiritual spiritual person she knows. And much like that, I am cautiously optimistic. And I know, as I'm sure you know, how many challenges we face. And I also know it's not helpful to get stuck in the mire of the knowledge of what that means. And it's more important to hang on to the optimism and what that can do toward action, because there is a lot to be hopeful about, and there has been a lot of change. And even getting representation corrected does a ton of work, restorative work on, maybe micro levels, but in the end, it makes a huge difference for a lot of people to be reading this type of book, or to be watching shows that we have out now, or movies that are coming out that really are doing restorative work for us. So in addition to the language work and the cultural work and the spiritual work, the time that we're living in right now, we have every reason to hope, for sure. I'm just always worried.
Yeah, I was raised with a tremendous amount of love and optimism from my very caring mother. And so I think of the 21st century as an indigenous century, and that we began the 20th century at our historic low. There were only 237,000 American Indians alive in the year 1900. And so every indigenous person you meet is a descendant of those 237,000 people that survived the colonization of the United States. And so now that we have our access to our languages and cultures as an incredible platform for us to continue to grow and go forward. And as someone who's an urban Indian who didn't quite get the cultural education that a lot of people in community get, I remain so excited to see these young generations. A Tribe Called Red, these Canadian musicians taking our ways of being into new places, seeing the contemporary artists like Deanne Reynolds Whitehawk and Henry Payer and all these amazing people taking our cultures into new directions, kind of fearlessly breaking through what our cultures can become in the 21st century, while still honoring the most important tenets of how our ancestors understood this world and their place within the ecosystems that they tended so greatly for. And so I just want to thank you, because once again, this book has just been so transformative for me as an older adult. And my mom even spoke to me yesterday in reading There that she finally understood why she writes the way she writes. And that's it's a form of control. I couldn't control a lot, but I can control the way that I wrote in these weird kind of patterns on a paper, and why she felt so compelled to do that. And it was just like a key that unlocked something in her yesterday. And so I really thank you for these types of works. Now, is there a question perhaps from the crowd that I have to address? Is that still part of the program today? No? And so I know we're kind of coming up on time. We got a couple more minutes left. Is there anything last you'd like to share with this wonderful community of Madison and all these wonderful supporters of the library system here in our region?
I don't know why I just thought of this, but we were talking about it earlier. An interesting little internet wormhole you all should check out for entertainment and education. It's a group called the 1491s.
Slapping medicine man.
I just met the fifth member, so I've now met them all. And so when I worked in nonprofit, one of the many hats I wore, I was a graphic designer. I made probably like 1,000 flyers. I never want to make a flyer again. And these guys were like an internet sensation. If you were native and on the internet, you knew about the 1491s. It was really special to do this event with Bobby Wilson, and it was the 5th one. And maybe there's more than 5, but there's like 5 at the core. And I've since worked with Sterling Harjo, who's behind Reservation Dogs, which you should also check out if you don't know about it. So I guess it's just been amazing to see, just talking about people doing things in the world to change perspectives and to bring new forms, to see them go from this comedy troupe and doing these things like having a medicine man slapping people, to now they're on Broadway with a musical called Between Two Knees, which in some ways parallels Wandering Stars, just going through the history of Native people and into boarding schools in a hilarious and like super crazy way that I haven't seen it yet. But and then these shows that are coming out, it's been so incredible to see their journey and to now know all of them and like be able to text them. It's just been a crazy thing and a blessing to be able to do that.
Well, let us all thank this incredible artist and the gifts he's sharing with us. Thank you so much, Tommy.
Thank you, Aaron.
This event comes together because of the work of a lot of people. There's one person who doesn't want me to call her out. She's in the back. Katie Kaufman, everybody. She's leaving the room because she didn't want me to do that. But it really is an all-hands-on-deck event for us at the foundation. Katie does so much of it, but also I want to thank Aaron Woodard, Alyssa Russell, Kate Herron, our interns Evelyn and Celia, Rodlin Banting, who is the communications associate for the book festival, and of course, Jane Rotunda. Will my staff please stand up, and we can give them a round of applause as well. I mentioned at the beginning, we've been in a lot of different rooms. We started out Black Hawk Country Club. We went to the Madison Public Library, went to Overture, and now we're here. I want to thank Monona Terrace for being our hosts here. This is the 7th year we've been at Monona Terrace. Their staff was here bright and early setting up for us, so thank you to all of you at Monona Terrace. I mentioned at the beginning that this is a record day. If you were here last year, it was also a record day. We had 700 people in the room last year. You may have noticed we had to expand. We have 800 people in the room today. Thank you so much. We have set a gross and a net and a people and a books given away record this year. We've raised more than $133,000 to be given to Madison Public Library. Thank you so much. And your donations, since I talked to you about the QR code, we've raised $3,000 from 50 different people. Thank you. That will go directly to author travel for this year's fall celebration. You don't have to stop now. There's still a QR code on your tables. There's still a dip jar outside those doors if you want to talk to me about how to be a benefactor or a member of the book festival or sponsor of the book festival. I am here all day. I really appreciate all of the support. There are so many wonderful people. We also have a committee of people who put this together. So if you're taken by the event today and you want to participate and help us with that, please see me or a member of my staff after the event. We'll take your name tags back. Please take the books that are on your tables. And please learn more about supporting the library through gifts to the foundation on our website, calling the office. I'll take you to coffee, whatever you want. I love the clicking noise. In closing, thank you all for uplifting books in our community and supporting our outstanding libraries. That's Lunch for Libraries 2024. Thank you all. Have a great day.